My name is Kayla Burton, and I'm going to be talking about the growing use of and the need for bilingualism in the United States. So, just to start with some statistics. The number of United States residents aged 5 and older who spoke a language other than English at home rose 14% to 31,845,000 from 1980 to 1990. Since 1980, the number of Spanish speakers in America has grown 233%. The U.S. Census Bureau predicts that the number of Spanish speakers in America will grow to between 39 and 43 million by 2020. However, as of 2012, there were already 38 million Spanish speakers in the United States, indicating that it's highly likely the amount of Spanish speakers will outgrow the prediction. Why the growth in interest? America has long been known as a melting pot. This term is used to describe the fusing of cultures and nationalities in America throughout the assimilation of different immigrants to the United States. Another reason for interest in the Spanish language is that it has a longer-lasting effect throughout the generations. Studies have shown that by the second generation of most other immigrant groups, English becomes the primary language spoken, and the use of the native language tends to become obsolete. However, for Spanish speakers, the use of their native language tends to not taper off until the third generation. The fact that the United States shares a border with a Spanish-speaking country indicates that the presence of the Spanish language means that the need to communicate is felt more prominently. The more contact between groups of people, the more helpful it is to be able to communicate with each other, hence the need to learn the language of the other group. A national language is seen as important for any country. It sets a precedent for unity as well as giving all citizens an acknowledged language to communicate with. Throughout the history of the English language, many tried to distinguish a national language for America. I've included a quote about Webster's thoughts on the national language. Shell said that Noah Webster claimed that the United States will produce, in a course of time, a language in North America as different from the future language of England as the modern Dutch, Danish, and Swedish are from German or from one another. Webster was wrong in this prediction, however, and eventually pushed for the use of English. He predicted that the future language of America would be different from the language of England, which we know there are some differences between British English and American English, but not so much as to constitute calling it a completely separate language. He did eventually push for the use of English, however, which constitutes the different spellings and pronunciations and phonetics of our language. This brings us to the question of the future of Spanish in America. With the growing importance and presence of Spanish, could English be replaced as the national language of America? Most people would say more than likely no. However, it does seem very probable that Spanish could become equally as valuable to learn and communicate with, making it perhaps a second national language. If not equal with English, then at least right below English, and used more than likely just as often. In the United States, many English-speaking citizens, especially older generations, are seen as unwilling to learn a foreign language, saying rather that immigrants or speakers of foreign languages should learn English if they want to live in America. However, many younger generations are becoming more welcoming and open with other groups of people. I've included a couple of quotes. The first is from Stevens, and it says, "The issue should not be the bilingualism of Hispanics. Bilingual education should serve as a means to ensuring a literate population in both English and Spanish." And I believe that this is a very good quote because it pushes for not only the bilingualism of Hispanics, but the bilingualism of English-speaking citizens as well. And the other quote basically just talks about the racism involved with states that border Mexico and the use of Mexican migrants as laborers. And it's if people are going to push for bilingualism from Spanish and English speakers alike, then they need to reach that goal of breaking down the racism and stereotypes associated with the Spanish language, as well as the immigrants from Spanish-speaking countries. So with these quotes, it's easy to see that although times and ideas are changing as well as attitudes, it might be a while longer before learning Spanish is as important to native English speakers, and the focus becomes more balanced rather than merely requiring Spanish speakers to learn English. For my last point, I want to talk about the education of Spanish in America. First, I want to point out the difference in bilingualism and biliteracy. Not many people focus on biliteracy, but I believe that it's a very important aspect of the education of Spanish in America. So bilingualism is fluency in or the use of two languages, and biliteracy is the ability to read and write proficiently in two languages. The focus of many educational programs for Spanish-speaking students is that of bilingualism without much focus on biliteracy. The two must go together and work with each other in order to create lasting and positive effects. The Bilingual Education Act, better known as Title VII of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1968, it was the first piece of United States federal legislation that recognized the needs of limited English-speaking ability students, or LESA. It was limited to only Spanish-speaking students, and it's not always been seen as the best or most beneficial of acts, which is why I've included the quote by Shell, basically saying that the Bilingual Education Act basically is just meant to, as he says it, help for the linguistically disabled, not so much as teach the students. So there are two types of bilingual education programs in America, mostly directed towards Spanish-speaking students, although in the additive programs, English-speaking students are involved as well. So a subtractive program, they focus only on the teaching of English without the maintenance of the home language, in this case Spanish. These programs are focused on teaching a student English as quickly as possible so that they can more quickly join the monolingual mainstream English-only classroom. This program also creates the idea for Spanish-speaking students that the only way to succeed academically is to only use English. An additive education program focuses on the addition of English to Spanish rather than the removal of Spanish entirely. Immersion programs such as this create and support the growth of academic skills in both languages. Lastly, I want to give an example of some of the information that is studied when focusing on the education of Spanish-speaking students. My last point is about a poetry workshop done in the southeastern United States. I've included a quote here as well. It was observed that although participants had a deep cultural background and Spanish heritage, they wrote following English language and grammar rules, even insisting that they write the poetry in English. But their written language revealed that they were following Spanish literacy patterns despite using the English language, which shows how deep their cultural heritage really goes. So in summary, there's a growing diversity in America, and the United States must adjust accordingly in order to remain a powerful country and function as such. Thank you.